Max. In the grand scheme of things, going out with Stella was probably a bad fucking idea. I had been best friends with Stella Armco since freshman year's first frat party, where we did 6 vodka shots in a row and subsequently threw up in the small dorm bathroom together for the rest of the night. Stella liked to joke that nothing bonded two gays together more than alcohol poisoning. I liked to ignore that she knew I was gay from the classy French tuck of my t-shirt that night. It should have been a clue then that when Stella called me at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night for a quick catch-up session before she caught her plane to London in the morning, that we would actually be having a nice, relaxing Sunday hangout. Instead, true to color, we had drunk all of the liquor in Sunny's Tavern, an incredibly hipster gin bar in downtown Seattle, complained about our terrible love lives, and then dragged our asses back to my apartment at 4 in the morning. It was creeping on 7:30 now. Fuck, I was going to be late for work. Despite this, it took about 10 more minutes of groaning into my pillow before I could even attempt to drag my sorry ass out of bed. I stumbled into the bathroom, the harsh bright light overhead making me wince. I was halfway done with brushing my teeth when I glanced up at the mirror. A bright pink sticky note was stuck to my forehead. I frowned at my reflection, letting the toothbrush dangle from my mouth as I pulled the note off. Stella's lopsided handwriting was as recognizable as her signature move of posting notes wherever she wanted. Hell of a night, half pint, got a plane to catch, see you in a few weeks, love. U.S. I rolled my eyes and went to crinkle the note before the sappy part of my hungover brain had me sticking it to the mirror instead. Getting ready for the day took another 15 minutes, but even that extra time didn't actually help much. I took one last look in the mirror, cursing at my bloodshot eyes and wrinkled button-down before darting out of the house. The fresh air helped immediately, and the extra-large, extra-strong Americano I ordered from the cafe halfway between my apartment and the office helped even more. My mouth was cotton, sure, but it was coffee-flavored cotton now. The heaviness of my head was countered by the warmth of the sun. And the rolling nausea in my gut, well, actually, that one kind of just sucked. There was no real upside to being nauseous. Still, by the time I made it to Spectrum Enterprises, I was only 10 minutes late and the Americano was half empty. 10 minutes late was pretty par for the course for me, and at least this time it was for a good reason. I laughed to myself as I pushed the button to the elevator. I doubted my boss or anyone at the company really would think getting smashed with Stella was a good reason. Oh well, you win some, you lose some. Someone's arm reached past me, and the elevator button smashed again. Already did that, I said, lifting the coffee cup to my lips. I glanced over and grinned wide behind the brim of the cup when I saw Luke Wilson glaring back at me. Ah, speaking of losing some. Sweet Spitfire Luke Wilson, second in his class at business school, right below me, third in class overall, and okay, I was fifth. We had both started at Spectrum at the same time, half a week after graduation 2 years ago. I started in sales, Luke started in admin. Somehow, we both worked in the same department now, in client services, underneath the same general manager. I'd been here for 2 years and still couldn't figure out their sideways promoting. I would never understand how promotions worked. I'd just keep my nose to the ground and hope I'd get one. Luke, on the other hand, was not a nose to the ground kind of guy. Not that he wasn't a hard worker, he was great, even if I'd rather have my teeth pulled than admit that to him. He was just way more into brown-nosing and looking around as if the secrets were in the walls. And it was always important to note, Luke's main career move was just glaring at me, and huffing at me, and rolling eyes at me. Didn't think you'd remember to click the button, he said, stepping past the opening elevator doors and speaking to me like a child. I laughed and followed him into the elevator. So the guy hated me. I thought he was hilarious. I leaned against the corner, letting Luke punch in the floor to our offices. I sipped at my coffee, shoving my sunglasses up on top of my head, and watched as Luke tapped aggressively at his phone. Good weekend, I asked. Luke grunted, not a response coming out in a grunt but a literal just push of air. I snickered into The cup and then tried again. Did you see the game this Saturday? Luke sighed, his head fell back, eyes squeezing shut. His mouth was opening and closing as if he was talking to himself. I took the lid off of my coffee cup and took a huge gulp. I waited until Luke lolled forward, eyes opening again, and started typing at his phone. I wasn't really sure why he didn't like me. Could be our different work ethics, I couldn't imagine. Luke even once getting drunk on a Sunday night, best friend leaving the country or not, he stayed late. Nearly every night, I left at 5:30 on the dot. It wasn't that I didn't try hard at work, it was just that I knew maybe a little better than other people in the office how short life could be. It was about more than just a good job. And clearly he could have a good job without all the terrible restrictions he put on himself. After all, we had the same job. I took a step closer to him and peered over his shoulder. Who is even up this ear? Oh my God, is your phone of? Luke's head snapped up and he shoved the phone, which definitely had a blank screen, into his pocket. It died. I forgot to charge it last night. I laughed, the nausea in my stomach fading almost completely because I was too delighted by his bright red face and narrowed glare. Apparently there was at least one cure for hangover nausea. Luke Wilson being caught as a dramatic bitch. I loved that guy, too bad we'd never be friends. The elevator dinged as we reached our floor, level 11, where half the offices for the company were, the other half were on 12 and 13, split because those were bigger. One day I'd end up on 13. Luke can have 12, I thought, grinning. I held the coffee cup in my mouth with my teeth clamped around one edge. The lid was still in my hand and I used the other to salute Luke as I squeezed past him, just to annoy him. He huffed. I felt another laugh building in my throat. Stopping by the recycling bin, I downed the rest of my coffee, tossing it and the lid away before making it to my desk. I only managed to shuck off my jacket and start the computer up before my work phone rang. I answered it quickly, frowning at my schedule on my cell phone. I didn't have any planned calls and it was only 8:13. Stevens, how can I help you? Harris Winston's voice firmly wiped the smirk off my face. Max, get into my office now. He hung up before I could answer. I sighed, turned the computer screen off and got back into the elevator. The trip 2 floors up to the CEO's office seemed to take 3 times longer than usual. Headache and nausea that had been slowly receding came back full force, an angry rush of hangover symptoms that a meeting with the big man induced. I strolled past his secretary and knocked on the door twice before letting myself in. Harris Winston was a brute of a guy. Physically and in business he was a massive man. It was difficult to be in a room with him and not feel like a scrawny teenager. Which luckily I was not anymore. I was just a thin 23-year-old. Thank you very much. I smiled brightly at him and threw myself into a seat, lifting my feet onto his desk and crossing my ankles. Hiya. You're late. I blinked in surprise. It was 10 minutes. How had anyone even fucking Luke Wilson, the narc? He had been late too. I'm sure he forgot to mention that part. Yep, I didn't really see the point in denying it. Any sort of checking would result in him knowing immediately. Belatedly, I added, sorry. Harris lifted one thick, bushy eyebrow at me. His mouth was a souring frown and I had barely said 3 words. This tardiness won't stand. I sighed and lifted my hands placatingly. It was the line for coffee and also how late I woke up. I'm sorry. Harris gave me a dissatisfied once-over. Get your feet off my desk. I rearranged myself so I was sitting more properly. I am sorry, I just forgot to set an alarm. Harris sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose in an exasperated and familiar way. You're a good kid and a good worker. You need to be a better employee. The wave of unsettledness that went through me had nothing to do with the hangover this time. I nodded quietly. He sat back and looked at me, considering. I tried not to fidget under his scrutiny. Still, CEO or not, there was only so long I could sit there quietly. Anything else on your mind, Uncle Harris? He narrowed his eyes at me. Don't call me that here at work. I knew the spiel and recited it under my breath as he said it. No one here knows you're my Nephew, I don't treat you no different, so I don't want to be accused of treating you different. It's bad. For you too. Bad for me too, yep, got it. This isn't funny. The sides of my lips quirked up in amusement anyway. What should I call you then, by the way? Sir Master, O ye who signeth the checks. Harris sighed heavily, sounding so much like my mother at that moment that I did burst into laughter. His lips twitched in amusement and he waved me away. Get to work, you brat. In a mirror of leaving another annoyed guy earlier today, I saluted Harris before sauntering out of his office and taking the stairs back down. The whole 11th floor was full now. I rapped my knuckles on Luke's desk when I passed him. Just to see that sharp, narrow green-eyed look of distaste, it brightened the rest of my journey back to my station. The joy, however, was short-lived. The day of a junior employee in client services was not a glamorous one, and by 12 o'clock, I was ready to give in to the seduction of quitting and finding a cheap plane ticket to London with Stella. But then the burrito truck was outside at lunchtime, and that buoyed me enough to survive the rest of my shift. I bumped into Luke a few more times during the day, but luckily nothing too involved. We did have to talk, meaning I didn't have to talk while he corrected me rudely and rolled his eyes, and some days that was just going to have to be enough for a win. Back in college, Luke and I had been in a lot of the same classes, in a few of the same clubs. Generally just on the periphery of each other's lives. He'd hated me the whole time. I used to try and understand why, but after a year or two the effort became more than it was worth. Sure, the guy said snide things and rolled his eyes when I answered questions in class, but his hostility was harmless, and honestly a bit, well, cute most of the time. It didn't seem to be tied to any sort of homophobia, since half of our mutual friends in college were gay and he didn't have a problem with them, so I decided it didn't really matter. Luke was always going to hate me, and he was probably always going to be peripherally in my life. I learned a long time ago that I didn't get to control other people, had no say over fate if I could accept it back then when things were hazy with smoke and grief, then I sure as hell wasn't going to get hung up on a coworker's attitude now. The rest of the day passed at the same breakneck speed as the morning, and before I knew it I was clocking out and on my way home. I made it to my apartment with a leftover burrito to eat for dinner, the number of one of the guys interning in sales, and no more conversations with cranky men who cracked me up. It was a pretty alright day all in all. 2. Luke. The flimsy paper plate on my lap teetered dangerously, threatening to dump my chicken Alfredo all over the carpet. I glared down at the pasta until the plate settled and then shoved my fork back into it. I chewed slowly, looking between my roommate Nick and his girlfriend Macy. They had thought ahead to put real plates underneath their paper ones so that their food was trying to fall in their laps. Macy's crossed legs took up half of the small couch, so I had been relegated by her pointed glance to the armchair across from them. And another thing, I said, taking a gulp of water, Max is the absolute worst at spreadsheets. And yet they keep letting him make the monthly rundowns. It's, you know what it is, it's nepotism. Macy arched an eyebrow. Nepotism is getting ahead because of family connections. Fine favoritism then. Are you going to talk about Max all night or just during dinner? I flushed and frowned, digging the toes of my socks into the carpet. Not sure yet, I'll keep you posted. Nick chuckled around a mouthful of pasta. He grinned at Macy. Didn't you miss Luke's I hate Max radio hour? She rolled her eyes. It's like we never even graduated college. I shoved another forkful of food in my mouth. It wasn't like I talked about Max that much. He didn't matter to me even a little bit. He was just frustrating, I said, pointing my fork at Nick. It's frustrating and, more importantly, unfair. I work twice as hard as him and then he comes strolling in late, clearly hungover on a Monday. Monday. Macy sat straight and looked between Nick and me with wide eyes. He was late. On a Monday? Well, fuck man, why didn't you start with that? Nick laughed, tossing his head back. I mumbled a quick screw you and ate the rest of my pasta. Silently, I could still feel the words and frustration bubbling underneath my tongue, but managed to hold it in. I knew I talked about Max a lot. It was, admittedly, one of my faults, but the guy just got to me. He rubbed up against me in an entirely invasive, unpleasant way, like no matter what I did, I could manage to actually scrub him out of my thoughts. It would be easier if we didn't have a history. Hell, half the guys at the office were assholes, and I managed to ignore the rest of them well enough, but something about Max, his dumb, easy smile, the way he could manage to trick nearly everyone he'd ever met into thinking he was a good guy, the way he never really had to try hard to get where I was frigging killing myself to be, dug at me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't dig him out. It was more Nick's worried glances than it was the physical feeling of my knees bouncing up and down that had me realizing how jittery I must have looked. I ignored his heavy look in favor of slowing down the bouncing and twisting my face into a casually interested expression, the effort involved in. That meant that I didn't actually hear half of Macy's story, but hey, at least I looked the part. I only made it another 10 minutes before I begged off. Macy and Nick cried out in protest, but I waved them off, grabbing all our dirty dishes from the coffee table and putting them away. I could feel Nick's worried stare on the back of my neck even as I scrubbed the creamy pasta sauce out of the pots. Hot water suds were climbing up my forearms with every harsh scrub. I knew that things were getting to me. Max was getting to me worse than usual, could feel the annoyance bordering on real anger burrowing right beneath my skin. It wasn't him, not really, sure. Max genuinely was an asshole and genuinely did suck, but it was more than that today. It had been 15 years since my dad died, longer than I'd even known him. My dad hadn't even known me at 15, he died a month before my 9th birthday. It was almost my birthday. Today, it was the anniversary of my dad's death. Logically, I knew an anniversary didn't matter. Logically, I knew that my dad wasn't any more dead today than he had been yesterday or would be tomorrow. An anniversary shouldn't have any sort of hold over me. But still, the anger burned beneath my skin and I let it. If I fought against the rage, I knew the only thing I would do was guarantee the release of the grief. I dried the dishes and escaped back to my bedroom before Nick or Macy could try to convince me to stay with them. I wanted to burrow under the covers and feel the anger and fight the grief, and tomorrow I wanted to go to work and make Max Stevens regret every time he'd crossed me. I shucked off my work clothes, carefully hanging up the slacks and jacket so they wouldn't crease. I pulled on a pair of old, worn sweatpants and threw myself on the bed. I grabbed my phone from where it was charging on the nightstand and sighed. 2 missed calls from Grandma. A flash of hot guilt swam through me. As hard as today was for me, I knew it was worse for Grandma and Grandpa. My mom had died when I was just a baby, some drunk who'd crashed into her dead on the spot. When Dad followed her a few short years later, it was his parents who picked up the pieces, picked me up. I called her and listened to the slow ringing, chewing on my bottom lip. I let it go with a pop when the phone went quiet, followed by Grandma's quiet, unsure hello. Talking to my grandmother, the woman who'd raised me, was an experience of contrasting urges. The urge to fall to her feet, thank her, give her anything she wanted was on the surface. That was the one I tended to indulge. She was a good, honest woman, the most formative person I'd ever met. I hoped every day that my life honored her, even when I knew there was no way I could ever repay her for taking care of me. But the other part of me, the quiet, hidden, selfish part, wanted to run and hide. Talking to her or Grandpa curled into my stomach all wrong, made me feel a little sick. Not because I didn't love them, but because I did, because I knew that with a single wrong word, a single accident, everything they wanted me to be would disappear in an instant. I was barely moving up in the company, after they'd worked so hard to get me into a good college. And I knew how much it would mean to them to see me succeed. I hardly ever made it over to the house for Sunday dinners anymore, even when I knew Grandma was already disappointed that I didn't come to church anymore, and I wasn't settling down with anyone and starting a family. I couldn't tell them why I couldn't do these things. I couldn't tell them who I really could. Risk it. I blew out a breath and shakily said, "Hey, Grandma." The quiet was gone in a half-breath. "Oh, Luke, I was so sure I'd missed you when you didn't answer your grandfather." "Oh, Bill, get in here." No, I said get in here, Bill, it's Lucas. Lucas, Bill, your grandson. Oh, Lucas, Luke. Oh, yes. Oh, good, Grandpa wants to say hello. I nodded and then rolled my eyes at myself. Okay, Grandma. Well, if he ever gets in here, she grumbled. I could see the pinch between her brows and the way she'd tap her foot impatiently on the kitchen linoleum as she waited for Grandpa to come in from the living room. After his hip replacement last spring, he moved just slowly enough to ignore his wife of 50 years. "How are you, Grandma?" She sighed heavily. "I'm good, sweetie, don't you worry about me." Fat chance, I thought. Okay, tell me about the ladies at Daniela and your church groups. Grandma didn't hesitate this time, going on about the various ladies and what those ladies were doing and their kids and grandkids. And did I know that Melanie Anderson? Oh, I remembered her from Sunday school, didn't I? Well, did I know that Melanie was single now, divorced, bless her, but single nonetheless, and if I wanted, Grandma would pass along to Melanie's grandma that I, too, was single. Grandpa finally got fed up listening and snatched the phone from her. I nearly thanked him. "Lord, woman, let the child breathe," he snapped at her, the sound barely muffled as he directed it away from the receiver. "Lucas." "Grandpa." Grandpa was a man of very few words. My dad had been more like Grandma from what I remembered. I was always closer to her for it, but Grandpa, there were some moments when he was the only one I could talk to. Or, as it was lucky, not talk to. We sat quietly, the phone as heavy as our breathing as we waited for the other one to break. As usual, it wasn't either of us that did it. Grandma hissed from the other side, "Bill, say something," and then Grandpa sighed and asked, "You doing okay?" "Yes," I said quickly, nodding. I didn't stop even after I remembered he wouldn't be able to see me. "Yes, I'm doing great." "Good," he said gruffly. We waited a half of a beat and then, "How about you, Grandpa?" "Oh, I'm good, boy, no thinking about me." I told him a bit about work and he invited me fishing, the same as we did every time we spoke. I hung up before he could give the phone back to Grandma and she could keep me talking another hour. When I plugged my phone back in, I could still hear Nick and Macy shuffling in the living room, the TV playing some reality show that they always watch together. It was hardly late enough to be ready for sleep, but I still got ready for bed anyway. There was a billowing sadness in my chest that I ignored. It was heavy, a low-hanging weight that promised a more sinister fall, but I pushed it down until holding it was exhausting enough that I fell asleep. Ugh. The next morning came much too quickly. My alarm, a blaring, angry 7 a.m. wake-up call, startled me awake, my hands flying in a sleepy, uncoordinated effort to slap it quiet. I normally woke up 10 full minutes before my alarm, but even with the extra bit of sleep, and having gone to bed early last night, my head felt groggy and my limbs ached from exhaustion. I wanted to go back to bed, burrow under the covers and sleep until my head stopped ringing. But sleeping in wasn't an option. People who slept in were people who were late to work, and people who were late to work weren't the people who got promotions. I needed that promotion. I needed to get the hell out of bed. By the time I rolled out, it was 7:15. Nick was already in the shower and I knew from experience that there would be nothing but ice-cold water left. That was why I always woke up at 6 to beat him to the punch. We were out of milk for the coffee and I spilled the last cup of black coffee all over myself, ruining the light gray pants and blue button-up I was wearing. I made it to work with 5 minutes to spare, but I was unwashed, hungry, and wearing casual jeans on a friggin' Tuesday. Then, right when I thought the day couldn't get worse, I stumbled into Max, literally crashing into the guy. On instinct, I reached out, grasping onto him to keep myself upright. His hands clenched, one around my upper arm, the other around my waist. He steadied me, eyebrows rising as he gave me a quick once-over. I froze, not even managing to glare. Instead, I just blinked at him in surprise. His eyebrows fell and his lips twitched. Luke. His voice, like nails on a chalkboard, woke me right up. I wrenched away, feeling my face flood with embarrassment when I realized that my own hands had been knotted up in his shirt. Max. He held up his hands in mock surrender. Whoa, watch the venom there, you fell into. Me. I glared at him and clicked the elevator button again, or maybe for the first time, I had to start getting up earlier. I couldn't stand it if Max and I kept having to ride the elevator together. Already it was 2 days in a row, I was being punished. Just get out of my way, I muttered. Max rolled his eyes. He did it obnoxiously, slowly, as if he was trying to make sure I'd catch it. From the corner of my eye, I gritted my teeth to keep from saying something, didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Wait a second, are you wearing denim jeans at work right now? The elevator pulled up, the doors opening. He jumped in front of me, slowly backing up into the elevator to give me a wide grin. Oh my God, you are wearing jeans. Even though it was infuriating, I could feel my cheeks heat up by him pointing it out. I stepped into the elevator and jabbed the floor button hard. Max kept talking like I hadn't been ignoring him for 5 years. This is so exciting, best dressed. Wilson is slumming it like the rest of us mortals today, and he was late yesterday. Max started laughing, a delighted peal that made my skin itch. I tapped my foot against the rising floor, counting to 10 over and over again as I tried not to say anything unnecessarily rude. Not that anything was really unnecessary where Max was concerned. It was all well-deserved. The doors opened and I launched forward. Max's arm flew out and curled around my elbow, holding me still. I spun around to him. He was still grinning, face bright and eyes laughing at me. Sure hope no one reports you for that. He patted me on the elbow before letting go, winking. I yanked my arm away and glared at him, feeling my face heat up. I guess I deserve that. He strolled past me, whistling as he went toward his desk. I watched him go, a fleeting sense of envy bubbling up in my stomach. God, I could practically taste how easy life must be for Max, how simple and casual and calm it must be to be a guy like that without a care or worry in the world. Life was a breeze for him. I slowly stepped off of the elevator and walked to my desk, letting the bruising jealousy ease out. With every step, I might not have as easy a life as Max, but I was not going to let that stop me. I was going to have just as good a life as Max Stevens, even if it killed me. 3. Max. The week passed with surprising quickness. I liked my job, always had, but working lower on the totem pole than I thought I was cut out for, doing work less fulfilling than I wanted, had me tired and bored most days. I understood that I had to pay my dues, but God, it was frustrating. But this week hadn't been half as slow as usual. It was a stroke of luck that Andy from marketing came down with the stomach flu, and I ended up with the Haseman account. I normally did more fact-checking, mind-numbing, not worth 100K tuition kind of work, but working in marketing with the designers and the actual creative teams was almost as invigorating as I remembered it sounding in college. For once, I showed up to work before 8 a.m. and didn't leave until well past 6 in the evening. My head hurt half the day from squinting at the computer screen, and my apartment definitely looked like someone who didn't give a fuck about laundry lived there, but at least I was finally doing work that didn't make me feel brain dead. That had to count for something. Despite that, by Friday I was one more note from design away from pulling my teeth out, bare hands and all. There was probably more coffee in my stomach than guts, and thank God I was about ready to shoot the account to the higher-ups. I leaned away from my desk, rolling my neck as I stretched in my chair. A low groan fell from my throat, the kinks in neck loosening only slightly. Sharon laughed, breaking into my self-pitying stretching. I cracked an eye open and glanced at her. Something to say. She lifted her hands immediately. Hey, I didn't say anything. I popped my back. Fuck off, Sharon. With the open concept office, everyone in our department heard me. There were 12 of us out here. The cubicles were shaped like a small square, 6 of the desks were on the outside, 6 on the inside. There was a small walkway for those of us in the middle, or as I had dubbed it a few months back, the quad. Most of us loved the nickname. I'd give out one guess who hated it the most vocally. I thanked the god of office planners every day that Luke was on the outside of the quad, at least. Now his annoyed remarks were somewhat muffled, and my laughter was softened by the cubicle. Walls. A few chuckles filled the space, Sharon rolling her eyes at me even as she laughed. A couple of the guys, Josh and Kenny, glanced up with bored expressions. I heard Luke scoff even through the divide of the cubicles separating us. Hey kid, Kenny was only 3 years older than me. My teeth gnashed even as I forced a smile onto my face. You enjoying that new account? My smile widened. Yeah, hundo p. Luke groaned. I heard the soft sound of his head hitting his keyboard, a familiar sound for sure. Followed by an even more familiar, you're the worst. Kenny and I exchanged a look punctuated by rolling my eyes and his wide grin. I considered the pros and cons of pulling Luke's leg some more, but I knew he was also asking for the Heyman's account, and despite how little he thought of me, I didn't want to be a complete dick to the guy. The rest of the day passed quickly. I barely noticed the way my hands were cramping and my spine was curling until I looked up and it was past 7 o'clock. I cursed, quickly saving all the files I was working on, and waved a quick goodbye to the few people left. Even Luke was already gone, though I had heard him grumbling while trying to find something else to do to stick around until I left. I knew it grated on him that I'd got the account rather than him. I had a few text messages from Brent, a buddy I tried to see once a month, but I could feel my heavy eyes and exhaustion clawing at me already. I sent off a quick-fire apology and promised to buy rounds next time. He sent me back a string of annoyed emojis but followed it with a NP, I get it message that eased at the very least the tension of feeling like a bad friend. I stopped at a burger joint on my walk to the apartment, picking up an admittedly too greasy meal, and managed to make it into my bed, sans clothes and with a huge pile of French fries by 8 o'clock. With a sigh, I happily started to munch on the food when my phone buzzed. A jolt of fear that it was work went through me. I was tired, damn it. It was Stella's name on the screen though. I grinned, shoving a fistful of fries into my mouth, and answered it with a garbled hello. I heard her groan as clearly as if she was sitting across from me. I could practically see her scrunched up nose. Maxwell, you're disgusting. You know that's not my name, I reminded her. She made a sound that was the verbal equivalent of waving her hand in the air, as if that matters. I laughed and took a long pull from the soda on my nightstand. So, I said, settling against the pillows, how's London? Stella started to prattle about her last few weeks. It had been almost 3 since she left, and already I was about to gnash out my teeth. Sure, I had other friends in Seattle, but none of them were Stella, and with me being so busy, even my non-Stella friends were AWOL from my life, admittedly. That was my fault, but still. And anyway, Stella continued, undeterred by my melancholy hums, knowing full well they were only full of me missing her. That was when I knew, without a single doubt, that I would never be a true British monarch. You'd never be a fake one either. Never say never, half pint. I laughed. Okay, fair, your birthday. Or Halloween, lots of ways to fake monarch here. I grinned, rolling my eyes at her. When will you be back again? Stella sighed, not for weeks. Oh God, weeks, it's already been weeks. I know, she cried. I shoved more fries in my mouth and chewed slowly. I didn't want to be so obviously upset by this news. So much could happen in a few weeks. Stella was rolling her eyes. I didn't see it, but I didn't have to. Sure, you could get married, have kids, all before I get my return flight from Heathrow. I'm just saying, I grumbled. Listen, I promise not to get married until you come back to Seattle. Scout's honor. There was a loud shuffling noise from her side of the line and then a quick, oh damn. Something wrong. Sorry, half pint, I have to get going, I'll see you soon. We hung up after a few more long, gushy goodbyes that both Stell and I were going to pretend didn't happen. I shot Mom a quick text about our weekly dinner, Sunday night 7 o'clock. I bring the dessert and tossed my trash into the can across from my bed. The burger wrapper missed and fell to the ground. I ignored it, talking to Mom a bit before turning in for the night. I was exhausted but still knew I was going to miss the assignment when it was over. I fell asleep dreaming about promotions. Ugh. I was halfway through reviewing the notes marketing had sent me, and 3/4 of the way through my Americano when the phone rang. I reached for it blindly with one hand while the other lifted the coffee cup to my mouth. "Stevens," I said, eyes scanning over the email still pulled up on my computer screen. My uncle's voice cut me off short. "Max, my office." I sat the coffee cup down quickly, frowning. "Hey, I've been on time, early even." Harris sighed. It was that long, heavy one that curled around me for a week after. I was sure he'd learned it from my mother. "Just get up here, you're giving me a migraine." I threw my hands up in defeat even though he couldn't see me, cradling the phone against my shoulder. I typed out a quick email to the marketing department that I would get on the revisions soon, and then hung up on Harris. When I made it up to his office, I froze. The door slamming behind me had two heads whipping in my direction. My jaw clenched and I glared at Luke's smirking face. What is he doing in here? Normally, Luke was the aggressor in this pissing match we had, but if he honestly thought I was going to roll over while he reported me again, he had another think coming. Harris interrupted Luke when he opened his mouth, eyes shooting daggers at me. "Enough, both of you. Max, sit down." Begrudgingly, I sat in the chair next to Luke across from Harris's desk. Luke squirmed in his seat, clearly wanting to snipe at me but unwilling to be unprofessional in front of his boss. "Idiot." I turned to my uncle and shot him my nicest grin. "I don't know what Luke has been saying, Harris, but..." He waved me off and rolled his eyes. Luke shot me a pinched look and I fought the urge to say something else. "I didn't call you in here to yell at you," Harris said slowly, eyebrows raising. I considered that. Forcing myself to not turn or fidget, he smiled at us, looking at us both carefully and appraisingly. "I have a project for you." My spine stiffened. Luke sat straight up in his seat, his face immediately shifting to something hungry and eager. Sir," Luke prompted. Harris cracked a smile. "It could be a way for you to move up the ladder here, both of you. I know you've both been hopping to bring something more to the table, to advance in the company, and I want you to know that we notice that kind of thing here. Luke, you have a great track record, Max. Your help with the Haseman account has been important." I couldn't help it. I stole a glance at Luke. His eyes were wide, expression nearly stunned in its surprise. I could feel nerves building in my chest. I turned to Harris quickly. "Is this like a competition?" "No," Harris said firmly. He placed both hands on his desk. "We have a sensitive package that needs to be delivered to a client in Los Angeles. You want us to facilitate the delivery?" Luke frowned. Harris shook his head. "It's not suitable for air travel. It needs to be delivered in person. I need someone I trust on this." "So you want us to drive to LA?" "I think," Luke said deliberately, shooting me an exasperated look. "What Max is trying to ask is, what precisely do you need from us?" "I need you to drive to LA and hand-deliver a package to one of our most important clients. Contents of the package are non-replaceable." "That's like 40 hours of driving," I pointed out. Harris threw his hands up. "Well, if you're not up to the task." Hey, no, I didn't say that. "Sir, I would be happy to complete the task myself." I glared at him. "Weasel, I'm sure you would." Luke glared right back. Harris muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear. It took all my energy to not glare at him too. I sighed. Why not send a courier? The package is, as I said, irreplaceable. I'd drive it myself, but I trust both of you, of course. You're both fully able to say no. Luke and I interrupted him with a loud litany of protests. He smiled. Good. When do we leave? Luke, straight down to business. At the same time I asked, what's in the package? Harris pinched the bridge of his nose and then smoothed out his expression. Confidential for our client's privacy, you'd need to leave immediately. I have dinner with Mom, I blurted out. Luke shot me an incredulous look. I, of course, will cancel any plans I have. Harris's mouth pinched. I recognized it as him trying not to laugh. Leave in the morning, take a company car if you want. My car works fine, I said. Luke rolled his eyes. I quirked an eyebrow. There was a beat before we both looked away, conceding the fight before it began. Harris didn't notice the tiptoeing of our battle plans. He was shuffling through papers. Here. He shoved an envelope at Luke. I tried not to take it personally. Luke flipped through the contents and then handed it to me. Inside were directions to the client. Drop-off location, contact information, and where to get the package before we left. Harris dismissed us. I saluted. He rolled his eyes. Luke shook his hand firmly. Fuck, he was a suck up. We walked quietly to the elevator. Luke was practically bouncing where he stood. His enthusiasm was a little hard to be annoyed at, even if he was a dick half the time. I punched the down button. So, I'll pick you up at 8. His head whipped to me quickly. Who said you're driving? I've seen the sack of shit car you drive. We're taking mine. His eyes narrowed. We could take a company car. Then we'd have to wait until at least 10 to rent it out and get on the insurance, and it'd be a whole big thing. No, we'll just take my car. Luke's lips pursed together. His mind was whirling for an excuse so bad I could see the smoke coming out the top. Fine, he said at last, a look of utter defeat crossing his expression. He pulled out his phone and tapped aggressively. I just airdropped my address to you. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, nodding. Okay, 8. 8, he agreed, sighing heavily. We stepped onto the elevator and he punched the button. I can't believe I have to drive all the way to LA with you. Oh, I said. I leaned against the corner of the elevator, crossing my ankles and grinning. I'm a delight. You're a pariah to society. Wilson, you are a treasure to society. Shut up, he grumbled, crossing his arms. I laughed. He stormed out as soon as the elevator cracked open, shifting his hips so he could slide between the still-moving doors. I cracked up, quickly texting Stella what had just happened as I made my way back to my desk. Sure, a road trip with Luke Wilson wasn't my favorite way to spend a weekend, but at least he'd be twice as miserable as I was, and Stella always did love a good Luke store.